The wind had a way of speaking on the plains at night, whispering through dry grass like it carried old memories with it. Memories of blood, broken treaties, and lonely men forgotten by the world. Elias Crow lived where that wind never stopped talking. His farm sat miles from the nearest town, a lonely patch of stubborn land carved out by hands that had long stopped expecting kindness from fate. He was a man shaped by silence. No wife, no children, only the rhythm of soil and sky to keep him breathing. When his horse returned alone that evening, saddle torn and eyes wild with fear, Elias knew the land was about to ask something from him again. He followed the tracks until dusk bled into night. Broken branches, deep footprints, far too large to belong to any man he knew. And then he saw her. She stood near the creek like a shadow pulled straight out of legend. Tall, unnaturally tall, broad-shouldered, powerful, wrapped in torn Apache cloth stained dark with blood and dust. Her black hair fell loose, tangled with leaves and pain. One arm hung stiff, injured, but her eyes were sharp as a drawn blade. She did not run. She did not beg. She watched him. Elias raised his hand slowly. He had survived gunfights and winters that killed cattle in their sleep, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of her presence. She was young, but there was something ancient in the way she stood, like the land itself had risen to judge him. "You are hurt," he said quietly. She answered in broken English, her voice deep, steady, commanding. "They hunt me." Before he could ask who, before he could decide what kind of man he still was, gunshots cracked in the distance. Her hand closed around his, wrist with surprising gentleness and unstoppable strength. "Come." She led him through brush and darkness like she knew every breath the land would take next. When they reached his farm, she collapsed only once inside the barn, blood soaking into hay. Elias worked through the night, cleaning wounds, setting bones, never once touching her without warning, without respect. At dawn she woke. Her eyes found the small bed in the corner of the farmhouse, the only bed Elias had ever owned. She sat up slowly, then spoke the words that would change both their lives. "You will sleep on my bed," she said. Elias froze. "Miss, it is safer," she continued, firm but not cruel. "They will search for me, not you. I will guard the door." He understood then. This was not a request. This was protection. That night, as Elias lay on the floor with a blanket and the sound of her breathing steady, above him, he realized something terrifying and beautiful. For the first time in years, he was not alone, and neither was she. By the third day, the hunters came. They were not lawmen. They were worse. Men who wore badges only when it suited them, who spoke of bounties and order while leaving nothing but ash behind. Elias watched from the window as dust rose on the horizon. The giant Apache girl, her name he learned was Naya, stood calmly beside him. "They will not take me," she said. Elias swallowed. "Then they'll have to go through my land first." What followed was not a battle of bullets alone, but of courage. Naya moved like thunder made flesh, defending without hatred. Without cruelty, only necessity. Elias stood beside her, rifle shaking, heart pounding, realizing that the lonely farmer the world had forgotten was standing inside a legend. When it was over, silence returned to the plains. Naya did not leave. She helped repair fences, taught Elias how to listen to the land instead of fighting it. At night, she slept on the bed, guarding the home she had chosen, while Elias rested nearby, not beneath her, not above her, but with her in trust. Years later, travelers would speak of a farm that no raiders touched, of a giant Apache woman who protected a quiet man with kind eyes, of a place where hatred stopped at the fence line. And Elias? He would tell anyone who asked that the strongest thing he ever did was open his door. The plains do not forget footsteps, and neither do men who have learned to survive them. Weeks after the hunters were buried by silence and dust, Elias Crow woke one dawn with the same old ache in his bones, but something in the air had changed. The wind still whispered, but now it carried purpose. Naya stood outside before sunrise, facing east, eyes closed, palms open to the sky as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Elias watched from the doorway and understood without asking. The land was speaking again. News traveled faster than horses in those days. By the time the cottonwoods shed their first leaves, travelers began to detour toward Elias's farm. Some came cautious, some desperate. A woman whose wagon had broken, a boy whose father had vanished, a trader who swore bandits had marked the river crossing. They all told the same story, of a place where violence stopped at the fence, of a giant Apache woman who guarded a quiet farmer and asked no payment except honesty. Naya met each visitor with steady eyes. She offered water first. Always water. A thirsty man lies, she would say. A fed man tells truth. Elias learned what it meant to share a home that had once been a shelter for only one. He learned patience as Naya rebuilt the barn beam by beam, lifting timbers no man could lift alone. He learned humility when she taught him to read tracks not as threats, but as stories where a foot dragged, where a heel hesitated, where fear took over. At night they spoke little. They did not need to. Trust grew like a slow fire, warm without burning. But peace in the West was never a gift, only a pause. The men returned under a different flag this time. A company man with papers and a smile rode in with surveyors and rifles, claiming the land for a rail spur that would bring progress. Elias, read the papers twice. They were clean, legal, cold. The company man looked at Naya the way men look at storms they plan to tame with fences. You can move, he said. There's room further south. Naya's voice was calm. This land already has a story. The company man laughed. Stories don't stop steel. That night Naya did not sleep. She sat at the table, carving small marks into a piece of driftwood. Names, Elias realized. Names of places taken. Names of people gone. When she finished, she placed the wood into the hearth and let it burn. We will not fight them, she said. We will outlast them. Elias felt fear then, not of rifles but of time. Rails brought towns. Towns brought laws that bent toward money. He thought of the bed upstairs, of the nights when he slept on the floor not because he was asked to, but because it felt right. Because guardianship was not ownership, and protection was not possession. He thought of how easily the world crushed things it did not understand. The next morning, Elias rode to town alone. He stood before the clerk, hat in hand, and spoke plainly. He spoke of water rights and winter floods, of the creek that swelled and swallowed unprepared bridges. He spoke of the wind that tore roofs from careless builders. He spoke of the graves along the old trail, unmarked and hungry for memory. He did not threaten. He told the truth. And he left a map on the desk drawn by Naya showing a safer route that would cost less in the long run. The company delayed, surveyors argued. Engineers frowned. Weeks passed. One night, shots cracked again, closer than before. Elias ran toward the sound, heart hammering, only to find Naya already there, standing between two drunken men and a family camped by the creek. She had not struck anyone. She had simply stood. The men lowered their guns as if the night itself had spoken. Elias realized then what strength truly was, not the force to break, but the presence that made breaking unnecessary. When winter came early, it came hard. Snow buried the road. Wolves followed the herds. Elias fell ill with fever, the kind that steals days without asking. In his delirium, he dreamed of fences falling and rails screaming. He woke to Naya's hand cool on his forehead, to her voice telling him to breathe. She slept on the floor those nights, closer than ever, guarding him the way she guarded the door. You will sleep, she told him softly. I will keep watch. He lived. Spring thawed the creek into song. The company never returned. A letter arrived instead, polite, distant, final. The rail would go east. Progress had found another path. Years passed the way seasons do, honest and unavoidable. Elias's hair went gray. Naya's scars faded but never vanished. Children came to learn, not to take. They learned to mend a fence and listen to a bird's warning. They learned that a bed could be a symbol, not a prize. A place of safety, not power. Travelers left coins on the table and gratitude in their wake. Elias kept the floor swept beside the bed upstairs, a space that remained his by choice, not command. On a summer evening thick with cicadas, Elias asked the question he had carried like a stone in his pocket. Will you ever leave? Naya considered the horizon. Everything leaves, she said, but not everything is lost. When Elias passed, it was quiet. He went the way he had lived, without spectacle. Naya buried him beneath the cottonwood where the wind told the gentlest stories. She placed no marker. The land would remember. They say she stayed for a time after that. Some say she walked west with the sunset. Others swear she still guards the place when storms come. Tall against the sky, keeping watch so no one sleeps afraid. And if you listen, truly listen, you might hear the wind say it too. Time did not stop at the cottonwood. It never does. After Elias Crow was laid into the earth, the farm did not fall silent the way places do when they lose their keeper. Instead, it breathed, slow, steady, stubborn. Fences held. The well stayed clean. Travelers still found the gate unlatched when they needed it most. And when storms rolled in hard and low, people swore they saw a tall figure standing at the rise, unmoving, as if the land itself had decided to stand guard. Naya did not mourn the way towns expected mourning to look. She did not cry in public or speak his name to those who asked. She rose before dawn, worked until dusk, and slept little. At night, she sat on the floor beside the bed that had once been hers to guard, palms resting on her knees, eyes open, listening. Grief for her was not loud. It was a vow. Word spread again, as it always did. A new sheriff rode in with clean boots and a softer voice. He asked questions and accepted water. He learned quickly that laws here were not shouted. They were practiced. When a rustler tested the fence, he found his horse calmly turned back at the creek. Reins cut clean, not stolen, not harmed. When a speculator tried to claim the well, his papers soaked through in a sudden rain and the ink ran until nothing could be proven. People learned. They always do. Spring brought a woman named Clara with 2 children in a wagon that had known better years. She asked for a night. Naya gave her a week. Elias's bed took the children first. Then Clara when the nights grew cold. Naya slept on the floor again, not because she was asked, but because guardianship had never been about comfort. She taught Clara how to read the wind in the clouds, how to set a snare without hunger in her heart. When Clara left, she left whole. Summer brought a boy who lied about his age and carried a knife too big for his hand. Naya fed him, listened, and then set him to mending a fence. If you want to carry a blade, she told him, you must first learn to hold a nail. He stayed. He learned. When he left, the knife was smaller, the hand steadier. There were nights Naya spoke to the bed as if Elias could hear. Not prayers, reports. The creek held. The wolves moved on. The children are safe. The wind answered in its way, rustling the cottonwood like approval. She never took the bed for herself again. Some things were finished, and honoring them meant letting them remain what they were. One autumn, a railman returned, older, thinner, without the company's smile. He asked to cross the land. Naya nodded. He crossed and did not linger. When he reached the far fence, he turned and said, they built faster than they learned. She watched him go and felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty that some lessons arrived late and still mattered. Age came to Naya gently. Her stride shortened. Her scars ached before rain. The stories grew larger than the woman. Children in town argued whether she was real. Travelers swore she was a spirit. Naya did not correct them. Truth did not need defending. On a clear night thick with stars, Naya packed lightly. She walked to the cottonwood and placed her palm against the bark. I kept watch, she said. The wind moved through the leaves like a hand closing around a promise. At dawn, the farm stood as it always had. Naya did not. Years later, when a storm threatened to tear the roofs from the valley, a group of strangers took shelter by the old fence. They found the gate open and the house warm enough to wait out the wind. Upstairs, the bed was neatly made. Downstairs, the floor was swept clean beside it. No one slept afraid that night. And if you ask the plains who guarded that place, they will not give you a name. They will tell you instead about a choice, about a lonely farmer who opened his door, and a giant Apache woman who turned a bed into a promise, a home into a boundary, and kindness into a legend that refused to leave.